All right. Hello, everybody. Is that cool with you, Jordan?
Yeah,
All
it's all good.
right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Art of Human podcast. This is my good friend, Jordan. How do you say your last name?
Delagrange.
Delagrange. All right, guys. This is actually my first time talking to Jordan. Like, we messaged each other, we found each other through IG. The way I found you, Jordan, was actually through the Tragedy Academy podcast. So I seen one of your
Yes.
videos, and I think I commented, and then that's what started the conversation. But yeah, welcome everybody to the Art of Human. This is Jordan. That's kind of how we met. Jordan, would you like to give me and also the audience a little bit of context as to who you are?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Of course, so my name is Jordan. Um, I was a Marine for 5 years. I grew up in Indiana, and after being injured in the Marine Corps and going through medical treatment, I was released general under honorable discharge, which is basically an honorable discharge, but not good enough to be medical retirement. So they put me out, and as soon as I finished my treatment, I went straight to college for um for acupuncture and massage. So I showed up at the school, like directly got my DD 214, got out of the military, went to college, and I was like, all right, what do I need to do to be a doctor? And
Okay.
they're like, okay, well, you don't have any college credits, so you can't apply for the doctorate program, but we have massage. So I was like, okay, let's do it. Right. So I ended up going to school for massage, and I got my associates in massage, medical type massage, after about 2.5 years. And then at the end of that, they're like, hey, by the way, now you can apply for the doctorate program if you want. So it all kind of just like fell puzzle piece together. I ended up doing a lot of kung fu. I met Sifu Sung Choi, which is the Wing Chun teacher in San Diego. The lineage is really interesting. Um, you know Bruce Lee, yeah?
Mhm.
It's kind of like a rhetorical question now these days, right?
Yeah.
Well, his lineage, it goes back to Ip Man. I'm sure you've seen like the Ip Man movies on Netflix.
Yep.
So this lineage in San Diego, it goes from Sifu, my Sifu Sung Choi, to Master Brian Talbot. From Master Brian Talbot, Master Ram Heimberger, who's now deceased, is in there, but he was a great master. Goes up to Grandmaster Samuel Kwok, and then that goes up to Ip Ching and Ip Chung, which were Ip Man's sons. And then, of course, you know that Bruce Lee was directly under Ip Man. So that lineage goes straight to that idol for me. And it's interesting. I know this is kind of a long-winded introduction, but
Oh, no worries, bro.
it's it's interesting how all of this just kind of fell into place, and I'm still kind of going onto that path, you know. It's weird because when I had exited the military, I didn't imagine myself going this way. It just kind of happened, you know.
Mm-hmm. Actually, how long were you in the military before you had to leave?
About 5 years, and I did re-enlist, but uh, you know, circumstances came forth to the release, and I just ended up onto this path. It's interesting because I didn't plan it. You know, when I first went to the Wounded Warrior Battalion, my mindset was I'm going here to get fixed so that I can continue to do my job in the military. And around that time, when I was being treated, I had some sort of like change in my mind because I had met my Sifu
Mm-hmm.
at that time, Sifu Sung Choi, and I started like learning all these things about the martial arts. And as my treatment moved forward, you know, I wasn't being treated only for like the physical things because I had some traumatic brain injuries in the Marine Corps. I had a back injury. Um, I also had like a diagnosis for like post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like it's like the martial arts and also the acupuncture treatment that I was receiving at Wounded Warrior Battalion opened something up for me. And that's when I decided, okay, I think it might be best if I didn't go forward with the reenlistment and pursued this other path.
Dude, that is so freaking amazing, and it's so I love the fact that you're saying like you're like in a weird way it's like this kind of opportunity or this path that you've now are on, it just kind of so happened. Like it wasn't like you were like, it seems like you weren't necessarily searching for it, but it just kind of fell on you, and it almost seemed like that's kind of what the universe was just like, yo, like I don't know. I love that though, because I do think there's this like natural flow of energy, and that if you're open to it, that there's a lot of opportunity to learn and grow. How do you? Because and I know you're in the martial arts, so you know I've been into like Eastern philosophy, and I've looked into like Taoism and Wu-Wei and things like that, and like I think this idea of like flow and this idea of like all this connectivity among us, like I think it's very interesting. How do you feel about those kind of concepts of like the idea of flow and this idea of connectivity and this, you know, how do you feel about that?
So when you talk about Wu Wei, what do you know about Wu Wei? How do you feel about Wu Wei?
Wu Wei, I feel like it is essentially the natural flow of energy. Like Wu Wei is, I think it translates in different ways, but I think one version is action without intention. So essentially, it's like you don't necessarily know where you're going. You're kind of, in essence, just kind of going with the flow of the movement. It seems like that's kind of how I perceive Wu
It's
Wei.
interesting. It's
How do
interesting
you?
because the first time I heard of Wu Wei was from my Sifu, Sung Choi, and he describes Wu Wei as to end conflict.
Mm,
Wu Wei is, it's not to seek that conflict, not to seek it out, not to be like a UFC fighter, like, okay, where's all the people that I want to fight? I'm going to fight everybody and I'm going to prove myself. No, Wu Wei is like, this thing is coming to me. It's an obstacle that I have to overcome and I need to end it quickly and move forward. So it is kind of like flowing. It's like constantly moving forward. Wu Wei applies to the philosophy of Wing Chun because Wing Chun is always going forward, whether it is progressively in life, whether it is physically in the fight, but you're never retracting back. You're never retracting back within yourself either, mentally. To have Wu Wei is to have enough balance to look at everything that comes at you objectively and find the proper resolution.
hmm. So would you say that Wu Wei is almost like a state of mind in a way, or a way of living, I guess?
I think it can be, because Wu Wei is a philosophy of kind of like a pacified aggression, if that makes
Mm,
sense. That's like a contradictory terminology right there, because you think of aggression as like being very springy, but when
chaotic.
you think of pacified, you think of, being very collapsed. You don't want to meet anything. You're pretty much like reserved to the point where you avoid all conflict. But if you have a pacified aggression, that means that you have a control. It's like when they talk about the bowing, right? You have the fist. This is something that my Sifu also taught me. He said the fist represents strength and power, and then the open hand represents knowledge and wisdom. And knowledge and wisdom must always cover strength and power and come first, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean when I say like pacified aggression.
Dude, that's so freaking awesome, dude. Like I've been following, I don't know if you've followed this monk. He's like the Sifu or the master of Shaolin Temple Europe. This is somebody who I found online. I think my brother had suggested me the video. There's a YouTube video that's like something about the five hindrances. and it was like from a TED talk that this Shaolin monk did. But that was kind of the first time I was introduced to this person, and then from there I started to see some of his other content, and just so fascinating to me this concept of this, the way he explained it, like he says the middle way, right? So it's kind of like that balance, that harmony. And he was saying how like the middle way is not necessarily just being dead center. Like it's not 50% this, 50% that, and just trying to be dead center. The middle way is actually like the way he painted it is like a circle. So it's finding the harmony between the two. It's like in a circle. So in a way, that's what I think of when you showed me this thing about the fist and the hand. It's finding this harmony between the two. It's not about having exactly perfectly 50% of each, but it's just having the sort of harmony between the two. And I feel like that kind of relates to the yin and the yang. And I mean, this concept that I've been talking about a lot lately too is like one thing could not exist without the contrast, right? Like light could not exist without the dark, and etc etc. I'm guessing some of this sort of philosophy has influenced your life, but do you think that kind of concept of yin and yang has had a big influence on you in your life?
Absolutely, man. You know, it's everything is that, you know, yin and yang. It's it's interesting when you think about it. It's called the Taiji. That's
Hmm.
what the yin and yang symbol is referred to in Mandarin.
Mhm.
And it's not so much a description of two things, like yin and yang aren't two things. It's a way of terminology of describing a relationship between two things, right? So you can't have the yin without the yang, because if you don't have yang and you have yin, there's no relationship, right? So they cannot exist without each other. And that also means, you know, they mutually consume each other. So as they're mutually consuming each other, they also mutually fuel each other.
Mhm.
And then you also have that space in between the yin and the yang, and that is the emptiness in between. Without the empty space, then you can't have the yin and the yang, which exists within the empty space. Right? So there's a lot of interesting things that the Chinese have thought about in the construction of this symbol. You know, they also say they exist within each other, right? So that's that little dot, that small bit that's inside the good within the bad within the good upholds the bad, and the bad upholds the good. If you try and take one away, it's like me trying to take everything that's up in the room away, but leave everything that's down, you know, or vice versa. It's impossible. So the yin and yang is very interesting. It's very interesting when you start to look at it objectively at life around you, you know. And when you apply it to martial arts, it becomes a lot more interesting.
How before for everybody listening, before we actually started recording, Jordan started to talk to me about how he feels how martial arts in a way has kind of lost its I feel like you what you were saying was like kind of its deeper meaning. Jordan, do you mind elaborating a little bit to the audience about this that you're talking about?
Yeah, you know, my Sifu and I have this conversation a lot. He he believes, and I share the belief with him, that the true martial arts, you know, the essence behind the martial arts is dying, you know, because it takes a lot of patience and a lot of time to learn martial arts the original way. You know, you get put into a horse stance, you know, you ever heard of horse stance?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you get put into that and you get your posture corrected and you spend years just standing, you know, developing your pung or developing your liu, right? Or, you know, developing, cultivating that energy, which takes so much time, takes concentration, it takes relaxation, you know, it takes patience, which we don't have because today we're so focused on getting to our destination, we forget about the steps we have to take on the way to the destination, and we want to eliminate those steps. So you start eliminating steps, you start taking away the essence of what you're doing, you know? And then it becomes about, okay, so I want to be a martial artist. So I'm going to go to this kickboxing gym and I'm just going to do kickboxing and do this in super intense exercise all the time. And, you know, not to talk bad on kickboxing or anything, but it's not it's not martial arts, right? Kickboxing is cool. It's a nice sport, but it's not Neijing. It's not internal art. You're not talking about the Dantian or the Kwa or the the deepness that's been developed within the original martial arts. 4,000, 6,000, 10,000 years ago, Bodhidharma coming to the Shaolin Temple and sharing the art. Because it takes years, you know? And the main reason why martial arts are dying is because of three things: ego, trying to be the best, lack of patience, and lack of personal connection with your teacher.
Hmm.
So to make a long-winded answer short, when you go to learn martial arts from someone, at least an average teacher around these parts, they're just there to get money from you. And they're teaching a curriculum to a group setting. There's never going to be that personal connection. And then you go forward to the patience aspect. There's not very many people with the patience to learn traditionally with and develop that relationship or that personal connection with their sifu. And it's sad, man. Going forward with the ego, everyone's trying to fight because they're trying to prove something. They're not trying to fight because they want to connect more with themselves and learn more about their body and their body mechanics and their mind. It's just, it is really sad when I think about it.
What do you think, maybe for anybody who may be listening who is maybe interested from our conversation or maybe was already interested in starting martial arts, what would be your recommendation, like to look for a good teacher, to look for a particular place that has all these things that you're mentioning? Like what would be an appropriate, like what can I do to look for a good studio or to look for a good teacher? What should I look out for?
Well, first, before you look for a good teacher, make sure that you can be a good student. They say that it's very difficult to find a good teacher, but it's even harder to find a good student.
Hmm.
Um, but what I mean by that is you have to eliminate the fullness of your cup before you can taste someone else's tea, right? So anytime you're going to go to learn something somewhere, eliminate all the things in your mind that you already know, right? So like when I first came to the Wing Chun school that I go to, I already knew a lot of martial arts and I kept on trying to apply the things that I knew, and it hindered my learning for a long time because I couldn't focus on what they were trying to teach me, and I couldn't apply that in the moment because I was already thinking about all these other things that were in my mind that I developed. But over time, as I started to develop that relationship with my seafood, I was able to let go. And then this goes forward into when you go to a studio, look for somebody that's going to take the time to cultivate that relationship with you because it's a two-way thing. You can try and cultivate a relationship with somebody as your teacher, but if they don't give you back that energy, then you're never going to get it, right? They have to have that intention to be your teacher, and you have to have the intention to be the student. And then going forward with that even further, you want to find a teacher that's not going to force their influence upon you, right? So my teacher, even though I came in and I was, doing all these different things and exploring different martial arts at the same time as learning the Wing Chun, he didn't tell me, oh, because you're doing all this, you've forsaken me, and I can't teach you because you're not doing the pure way and your way is not right or anything like that. He just stood by and watched me do these things. And he's like, oh, I see what you're doing. Now let me adjust you a little bit, so on and so forth. So he would add in these little adjustments anytime I would learn from him, and he would continue to build me up. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody to look at you objectively and see what you need, give you what you need, but don't influence you too much and let you discover what you want for yourself. Wing Chun is a good place for that, I think. Although I would say it's difficult to find a good Wing Chun teacher because Wing Chun it's like it's changed so much. You know, it's like deviated so much. It's difficult to find a good lineage these days. Same thing with other arts like Tai Chi. Tai Chi is really obscure in the United States right now. Because when I think of Tai Chi in the United States, I think of like people at the YMCA, you know,
Mhm.
you know, like or I think about maybe old people in the park doing more of like the health style or like the yang style. Not to hate on the yang style, but if I were to tell someone to learn Tai Chi right now, I would tell them to learn the Chen style, the original family style of Tai Chi.
Why
All
is
these
that?
long-winded answers today.
Why is it that you would recommend that one and not the other one? Because I actually I don't know those particular terms when you're saying the yang and the other version that you mentioned.
Yang style was developed after Tai Chi, after the Chen style. Chen style was developed by General Chen Wenting about 4,000 years ago. And he had retired from the military and he was just kind of like at his homestead in China. And he wanted to put together these martial arts into a form. So he made a bunch of little short forms. Um, Basically took the compendium of all the martial arts at the time and combined them from China. And he put in a lot of elements of his family style of the cannon fist because his family was like bodyguards. So he developed this way of moving. You know, Tai Chi means the yin yang symbol, and then Chuan, you know, Taijiquan, which is Tai Chi, means the fist, right? So he developed a way of fighting which adheres to the principles of how the universe works. And that sounds really like poetic and magical, right? But it's just a matter of using your body mechanics and moving your body in accordance with physics internally and externally. So then you talk about internally, you see all these clinical trials for Tai Chi and how it enhances the functioning of your body, your organs, right? So you're pushing it out, you're moving, and there's no tension. So the fluid is moving through the veins, the fluid is moving through the lymphatic ducts. You're breathing, you're regulating your heart rate. So this whole time, your blood is spreading, you're eliminating blood stagnation, the lymph is spreading, you're eliminating yin stagnation, which is like the fluid, and then the breath moving the air. Air is like chi, you know, because air, the gases in the body, we don't think about it. There's a lot of empty space in the body because of what we breathe in. We breathe in the nitrogen, the carbon dioxide, the oxygen, and everything, and then that reacts in the body, creates ATP, and then when we move, ATP explodes, and that creates bioelectricity. So that's part of chi. But if you look at the translation of chi in the kanji, the calligraphy, it actually translates to air,
Hmm.
which is very interesting because the Chinese, they knew somehow that when we breathe, we are cultivating the chi.
Hmm.
So much stuff I'm talking about here.
No, you're good,
You're
dude. I
just bringing
mean,
it all out.
that's good, man. I could tell you're fucking passionate. And I'm like the same way. And like I'm not like super I have not trained myself through the essence of martial arts, but all these concepts that we've been talking about, I mean, these have been the true things that have actually helped me become a much healthier, happier person, and just a person that is much I have a lot more internal stability because of a lot of these learnings, and then just applying them and doing my own practices. Um, how do you feel regarding meditation? How do you feel regarding meditation? I
Meditation.
feel like meditation is something that is often talked about with regard to like clearing your mind and all these different things. I know it's like a huge suggestion in this like fast-paced world, but I think everybody always explains meditation like in a different way. So you, with your experience, I'm interested to hear your perspective on meditation.
Here's how I like to think about meditation and mindfulness in general. Meditation is like you're a mountain and you're unmoving. Your body is a mountain, and then your thoughts are the clouds above the mountain. So they're just moving over, passing by. They don't stop, they don't dissipate, they don't go away, but they just move across. Right? So you become in your body, in your physical way, separated from your thoughts. You still validate them, you still hear them, but they move away. Right? So it's like you're separating yourself from your emotion, separating yourself from your logical mind, and you connect more with that unmoving mind. That makes sense.
Yes, and you know what's interesting, man? During my journey of, I guess you could say, my spiritual journey, I spent a lot of time in that place of just observation, observing the emotion, observing the thoughts, just observing everything. And something that I've come to realize for myself was that I feel like there's a time and a space to just be the observer, but then there's also the essence of just actually just being all of them. Because what I've experienced is that when you disassociate from the feelings, and you more so just observe everything versus actually embracing it, then I feel like you can have this disassociation with the body. And I feel like what I've come to realize, it's having that balance of observing but also being the feeling, if that makes sense. Like the whatever emotion it might be, if you feel sad, to really feel the sadness and to really be okay with the why you are sad, and being okay with having the thoughts of what is it that's making me sad, or what is it that's making me upset, and being able to vocalize yourself, but at the same time not be consumed, and to get into this. It's a very strange thing. I feel like it's almost like an art form, the idea of meditation, the idea of being one with yourself. In a way, I feel like it's an art form because you are the awareness of everything, but then you are also, I feel like everybody describes it differently. You can say that you are just the awareness of everything, but I feel like you are also the emotion, you are also the thoughts, you are all these things. And it's a very strange thing. And I'm just kind of going on a rant at this point, but do you kind of know what I'm talking about? I don't know if, have you ever felt that where you become the observer for so long that you kind of feel disassociation?
There's a balance between it, because if you become too logical, where you're analyzing everything, you're overthinking everything, and you start to develop anxieties, because you're just thinking about like, oh man, like at work, I said this, and someone like saw me say this, and they're probably thinking about what I said, and then I also did this, and so you're in that logical mind, right? But you can also be too much in the emotional mind, where you're just like feeling everything, feeling all the emotions. You're just like, oh man, I feel so sad right now, or I'm really angry, or I'm feeling all these things. But then you have the in between, where you've got the logical mind and you've got the emotional mind, and you're kind of like analyzing the feelings in the middle. You're like, okay, I feel really angry right now, but why do I feel this way? Okay, so now I understand why I feel this way. What can I do about that? Okay, is it logical, or is it practical for me to feel this way. Okay, it is practical, but do I need to hold on to this anymore? No. Okay, so I'll let this feeling go. I validate, I understand why I feel this way, but now it's time for me to move on with this feeling, right? So you feel it, you understand it, you validate it, and then you let it pass, right? So it's like the mountain. You're unmoving, right? But then you also have to realize that mountains, they are not really completely stable, right? Because a mountain is formed by two plates pressing on each other. Over time, it starts to rise out of the crust of the earth. And eventually, it reaches this peak. So think of it like this: the logical mind and the emotional mind start to rise. That pressure, the tension of life can actually uplift you, depending on what you do with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you go too crazy with it and you think too much, it's going to have an earthquake and you're going to shake up your life a lot because you're going to be too frantic to understand what to do, right? But if you take your time and you balance out the two sides, you're going to lift yourself up through life and you're going to reach your goals because you're able to objectively and logically deal with things, but also have the empathy and the emotion to connect with people. Let's be honest here, you don't get anywhere in life by yourself. It's impossible. You know, you don't see any billionaires in the world who are like, yeah, I did all this myself, like this is all me. And if they do say that, then they're lying.
And they're just really unhappy too.
Yeah.
If that's actually the case.
Yeah. If they really honestly believe that they became a billionaire from their own effort, then they're missing something. There's something in their mind that hasn't connected yet because we're building up ourselves in life through connection with other people. And being able to make that connection, that's part of having that wise mind, right? Because if you don't have the observation skills to notice somebody's feelings and empathetically connect with them, because you're too logical, you don't have that emotional mindfulness aspect. So then you're just going through life and you're worrying about, okay, I got this meeting I got to do, I got this I got to do, and then you walk by someone who's like clearly exuding this energy that you should probably pick up on and notice, and be like, hey, you doing okay today? And then you create that connection. So if you go through life like that all the time until you die, you're going to miss out on a lot of connections. You miss out on connections, then things might not happen for you, right? So it's important to have that empathetic side.
And I think that's where the importance of like humility comes from. Because when you have a certain level of humility, then you have the capacity to connect with a lot more people. You know what I'm saying? Because when your ego is too big, it's like there's a lot of people that you don't get to meet because you have this like barrier, you have these prejudices that make it so that you automatically don't connect with somebody. But I think for sure, like me on my path, like just having humility and kind of like you were saying when you went into to be a good student, you have to have space in your cup to be able to learn something new. Like I feel like that's so important in life to have that emptiness or have that beginner's mindset or have the compassion to still like yeah, just the compassion to like not think that you're always right and just to like hang out. I don't know.
Yeah, you,
You know
you
what I'm
need to be
saying?
able to listen. You need to be able to listen, and just like take some time to hear people sometimes
Mhm.
and think about what they're saying. It's cool to have knowledge, right? I think about it this way. It's like you let people fill up the cup. You fill up that cup, and once it's full, then you can add some spices in there. You can add some of your thoughts, add a little bit of your essence to it, and then give it a little taste, see how it feels, and then share it with them. Be like, hey, what do you think about this? See what they think, see how that feels for them. And then together you're making a bomb recipe.
Yeah.
Don't make anything one-sided. Make everything in life two-sided, three-sided, four-sided. The more sides you have, the more creative it becomes. Creativity is the greatest power of the human being, because no two humans will ever think the same thoughts, which is pretty powerful
Pretty
because you have
crazy, yeah.
billions of people on the earth, right? All with their own unique creative power. Now, if you combined all the minds of each human on earth, we'd be a really powerful species. That's difficult to do, of course, because we don't have that level of mindfulness yet. But if you can do that even with a group of 5 people, well, that's how real success comes into people's lives. The thing is, I've noticed just like having my own business and working with people closely, or like being a manager or whatever, or being in the military where you have to collaborate with people and have this like command and control. When someone gets too focused on me and my idea, and I have to make my brand, I have to make my thing, and this is my thing, I'm making it, then they're not going to succeed, right? They might like claw their way up, but it's going to be dragging on them hard, right? It's like they're
Mhm.
trying to climb Mount Everest, but only on the vertical basis and with just an ice pick, like not even 2 ice picks, one ice pick. And then on top of that, they've got like 3 45-pound like bags hanging off their other shoulder, you know? So instead of climbing through life on your own power, the best thing to do is to connect with others and then see how you can climb together.
Yeah,
Let
that's
go of the ego.
yeah. And it's so cool cuz like when you get to just talk to other people and hear their perspective and hear about the things that they're excited about, it's like I don't know, it's like you were saying about kind of making that recipe like me and like obviously me and you talking right now is a perfect example of it like just sharing our thoughts and then listening to each other and seeing how maybe we could have related to that, but then also like maybe pushing the boundaries in terms of like maybe like our way of thinking, like pushing the boundaries, like that's actually something that I think is really important and that I've come to realize. Like, I feel like you have to push the boundaries with what's comfortable, especially I think is good in relationships, because then you get to, I feel like you kind of get to have a deeper understanding for each other, right? Like when you push each other's boundaries, that's like, I think, I like Formula One, and there's one of the team principal for Mercedes Benz, like, he was saying something about like his relationship with his number one driver Lewis Hamilton, and they were saying how they're always kind of there's a certain level of like butting heads, like they have differences, but and sometimes they kind of could agitate each other, but then at the end of it, like they found that common ground and they're able to like move forward. And I don't know, I just think it's so interesting that kind of like you were saying, like you're not gonna get very far on your own, and I think a part of the process of putting your ego down is like, just knowing that sometimes you're not going to know the right answer. Like sometimes someone is going to like know something better than you, or sometimes, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. What do you think about that? About that pushing the boundaries thing that I'm mentioning?
That's also a good example of Wu-Wei, you know? It's it's like someone pushes on you, they push on your way of thinking, especially as a teacher. So going back to like being able to choose a good teacher. If your student is trying to get you to think about something, or trying to put an idea out there from their mind, and then they're pushing on maybe something that as a teacher you don't agree with, or maybe that you haven't thought about, instead of like pushing back and like, no, it's like, no, I'm not talking about that. Then you get to the point where you're like, all right, let me think about this is interesting. This is where good teachers start to cultivate things and create things. So that's the creative force, right? Someone pushes on you a little bit and gives you a little bit of energy, and then you take that and you're like, what do I do with this? Think about it for a few seconds. A good teacher would pause. They'll pause and ponder, and then all of a sudden something will come and they'll just let it out, right? So you take the energy of others, ponder on it for a second, You don't have to always give them an instant response, and then tell them how you feel, right? So that's really,
Mhm.
it sounds like overly simple, but that's just all it is, man.
Right?
You know?
Do you follow this guy called Gary Vee?
Gary Vee, I haven't heard of Gary Vee.
Ah, dude, you gotta check him out. I would talk about. I mean, it's like one of the things that I'm practicing now on my path is like, just really sharing and talking about the things that I really love and like not shying away from it. Cause I feel like at a certain point, I was like, oh, okay, like, I don't want to get attached to anything. But at the same time, it's like there's certain things that have just really resonated really well with my soul. And like, I just love to talk about them. So like this dude, Gary Vee, like, oh man, like it's just kind of interesting right now. You said that thing about like a good teacher will have those pauses. But like this dude is like he's so explosive, or what I mean is like his energy is so high that like dude, he'll give his responses so quick. And like I'm not saying this to like contradict what you just said. I just find it so interesting because like there's no real rule book to this whole thing. Like everybody has their own way of being, and I find it so interesting. And like, dude, this character Gary Vee, this guy, like you gotta check him out and you'll know what the fuck I'm saying. But it just, I don't know. I'm just bringing that up because, yeah, I just thought that was
His
interesting.
pauses might be shorter than someone else's pause.
Exactly.
You
See,
know?
that's exactly it because like everything's contextual to the person. So for instance, like, and I love the fact that you said that because someone's long pause could be 5, 6 seconds, but someone else's long pause could be like 1 second. So like, I don't know. I love the fact that you just said that because that's really what it comes down to is the fact that everything like we everyone perceives things differently. Like something that's a long time could be this for someone, but something that could be a long time could be something completely different for someone else. So it's like that's
Yeah,
like the internal like spiritual self-awareness part cuz essentially there is no rules. There's just concepts that just like we can relate upon, but it may not be in the same way.
yeah, nothing in life is truly established, right? Everything is subjective to perception. And that's something that Einstein said. Einstein was very adamant about life is how you perceive it, and it's mandated and developed based off of your perception. So a wider perception leads to more possibilities, and more possibilities leads to more ideas, right? So he talked a lot about thinking outside of systems, right? Because right now in our society, we want to think systematically in everything we do. It's like, okay, we got mathematics, we got chemistry, we've got the periodic table, and we've got our categorization. We put everything into a little box so that we can organize it and think about it. We've got all these like little file cabinets in our minds. But in order to truly create something new, in order to truly create something that's going to pioneer the next age, you have to have engineers. You have to have people that are not having these file cabinets. Like maybe they have some file cabinets in their mind to like store previous knowledge, but then they're going up to this drawing board and they're like putting together these different shapes, these different like ways of thinking that are completely outside any sort of system the human race has created. And that's what he means is like if you think about everything from within the system, then you'll never leave the system. But if you start thinking about things from outside the system, then you add to the system, and then the system becomes better, right? But then that also establishes the fact that in order to think outside the system, you have to understand the system, right?
Yep.
Because if you don't know the system, then how can you think outside of it, right? How can you add how can you add rules to something that you don't know the rules for, right? So this is how everyone begins. Everyone gets born, they get brought up, as a child they have these things that they naturally connect to. It's like when you see a child dancing for no one, right? They're amazing, right? They flow through it. They have the complete creative energy. And then their parents will notice, oh, they've got this really great talent for dancing. So now we need to send them to these schools. Now we need to have people watch them and so on and so forth. So then the child gets more rigid because they've been structured and taught and put up into this system of dancing. And then later on, as they've lost that child creative energy, they start to realize that and they relax into the system and then they start thinking outside of it again like a child. So that's the rediscovery of the self. After
But
that rediscovery, then the true blossoming comes.
then I feel like almost like I feel like then that's a huge component to life is that rediscovery because I feel like maybe some children have such a tough life at the beginning that maybe they don't even but even then I feel like every child has a certain level of innocence that they're able to experience and it's always about that rediscovery because I feel like it's probably very rare within any society that a child or a do you think it's inevitable that you have to take yourself out of the system again? Like, do you think there's anybody who has creativity as a born child and just always keeps it? If you know what I'm saying? Like, because I mean, I suppose you could have two parents that are very free spirited and just very wise, and then they could raise their child to maintain that formlessness. Or what do you think?
It's a very difficult thing to do
Right?
as a parent, you know, because as a parent, I'm not a parent myself, right? So I don't have children, but I've seen my nieces and nephews and how they've been raised, and I've seen children and how they've been raised, and it's all objective to the parents and what they decide. They can either be highly influential on their children, or they can be very cultivating to allow the child to grow. But you have to give the child some sort of direction, right? Otherwise they can't blossom, right? So you have to give them some sort of system or some sort of mindfulness, right? So then there's the question of like which direction do I lead them? So in order for a child to rediscover that innocence and rediscover that creative energy, their parents have to be in tune with that themselves. And you'll see that too. You'll see the difference between a person who had a caring parent that was there, that was listening, watching, and being very receptible to that child, right? And you'll see those that weren't there. You'll see those that projected their own burdens onto the child. Ultimately, though, regardless of any of that, later on in life, it's that child's responsibility to find that again, regardless of whatever upbringing. Because a lot of times you'll see sometimes the people with the most hardship growing up end up being the most introspective, right? So maybe the people who are the most successful at becoming mindful didn't have good parents that were leading them and cultivating them. They had to cultivate themselves, right? So then there's like this balance. Is someone who had great parents who were so caring to the point where they subdued them, right? Took away their creative energy because they didn't need it. They didn't need the introspection because the parents were giving them everything. Is that worse than parents who gave them lots of hardship and lots of introspection? It's all subjective, man. It's like it it changes. Every situation is different. Every cultivation is different. It's just a matter of are they going to get there or are they not going to get there? But ultimately, we're all trying to get there. We're all trying to make it through this strange process of self-actualization. It's just a matter of education. So now taking away or taking a step back from the parents, then what can we do as a society to help lead those who might be lost? because we're not forcing people to go anywhere, right? I'm not talking about religion here. Religion is like, up, you do this, you must obey. If you don't obey, then you're wrong. No, we are not looking for obedience. We're looking for self actualization, self expression. So, how in society can we lead people to connect more with their Shen? When I say Shen, I mean connect more with their own spirit and develop more of their essence. And when I say essence, it's like their Jing. Their Jing is like their prenatal, so their parents' essence, postnatal, so societal essence. How do we help them develop that, find balance between that? That's the mindfulness education that we're missing today. And
Hmm.
that's the type of thing that you can learn and develop through martial arts and through Tai Chi and through meditation. And that's why it's so important.
So do you think that's what makes you passionate about what you do because you're able to help people in that aspect that you just shared?
I think so. And for me, it's kind of interesting because I feel like I had a little bit of both when it comes to the hardships and it comes to like the giving. Because my parents are divorced, right? One parent was very giving, very providing, and the other parent was kind of absent, right? So one parent maybe had more things to like discover about themselves than the other. But it's interesting because they both kind of did. Like one was very giving, like almost spoiled me, right? The other made me do everything myself and made me like, they weren't there for me, but the other one was. So it's like kind of this yin yang thing. And then one was very emotionally detached, like no emotion really. And then the other was too much emotion, no control of the emotion. So then growing up through that, you can imagine that I saw both of these extremes, and then my brain was just kind of like bouncing back and forth between the two until it came into the middle, right? So I'm not saying I'm like a Buddha or anything, but I think I can understand both sides. And then you apply that to everyone you meet, not giving a vibe that you expect them to be some way, but just taking them as they are. That's what I've learned. The more that you are just accepting each person you meet as they are, the better and more comfortable they'll feel around you. And the more comfortable people feel around you, then the more you can get from your your interaction with them. Not in terms of like trying to gain things from people, but the more interaction and the more energy you can exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're facilitating channels of communication, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I know exactly what you're talking about, dude. To me, this is so fascinating, and I mean, me doing this podcast has kind of enabled me to meet a lot of different people, and it's interesting because, like, you're a dude who's like gone through your life, and I love it because then when I hear, for instance, like you talk about that, your parents got divorced and these different, one parent was this way, the other parent was kind of the opposite, and you kind of got to see, but I could relate a lot to that. And, without any specifics, like I could relate a lot to that in the sense that I feel like it was actually fairly similar in my upbringing. And, yeah, it's just crazy. As you grow up, you have that capacity to then go back and reflect. And that's the part that I never really had the chance to do too much of earlier in my life because I was just so much in the system of going to that next step, like you were saying earlier about always going to that next step, next step, next step, and not really being conscious about what the present moment is. How am I feeling in this moment? What are my thoughts and all these different things. It was just a lack of connectivity with my inner self. um but I definitely have found for myself that it is really important to reflect back on what your environment was like when you were younger. Who were your parents? What was your like, what people were around you? And interestingly enough, what I've come to realize now is like, now when I talk to people, it's like I strangely could relate more to like almost anybody, because in a weird way, by understanding myself better, now I could connect more with other people because I've felt the good, the bad, and I've been honest with myself. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting how when you understand yourself better, you kind of naturally start to understand the world better. Because I think that, this is something that a lot of people talk about, or at least because I guess I'm involved in the community, or I talk about this and I listen to content like this. But the whole idea of like loving yourself and then loving other people, you know, putting your mask on. If the plane was coming down, you put your mask on first, and then you put it on your child, because otherwise, the child wouldn't have anybody to help after, because you could possibly pass out. It's this interesting thing, man. It's really interesting about that. Like, once you have this better understanding for yourself, when you stop the judgment within yourself, like, you start to have more empathy for people, and you start to judge people less, and you start to see things more for what they are. So it's like, it's like, yeah, it's interesting. That internal and external kind of thing.
I think we can talk about Wu-Wei again. It's like you take things as they are and try not to add anything to it until you fully have absorbed that. Because a lot of times you're interacting with somebody and they'll say something, and then all of a sudden what they say might conflict with something in your mind, right? Something that maybe I'm trying to think of an example. Um, Maybe someone comes up to you and they say, "Oh man, last night I drank so much," right? And then that first sentence, maybe you don't drink or you think alcohol is bad or something, and you're like, "Oh man, this person just drinks all the time and they're just a heathen because they're drunk all the time or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the instant negative response. But then maybe the sentence after that, they're gonna be like, um, "I drank so much and then something happened to me, and I feel a certain way. Like I feel hurt because of what happened." And then if you've already judged them, right, and you've already put this negative energy into your mind about them drinking, like maybe they don't drink all the time. Maybe they're just going through something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were trying to cope with something and they just don't know the right direction to go. Maybe you can help them with that, right? Just by listening. So instead of judging people from the first sentence to you, listen a few sentences and then think about, how would I feel in this situation, or if I was in that situation. And then after you realize how you might feel, think about how are they feeling right now. And then after you realize how they're feeling, then respond, you know, then be
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, that's interesting. So, you know, tell me more." Then they let out that energy. They let out what's hurting them. They let out what they're holding on to, because since you have interacted with them without judging them already, they feel comfort. Then after they feel that comfort, they're going to give it to you, right? They're going to give you that energy, and then at that point you have to swipe that away. Because sometimes they might give you negative energy that they're holding on to, and it might seem like they're projecting it towards you. So that's another situation. Like, for example, trying to think of another example here. You might say good morning to somebody, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Good morning," and they're just like all pissed off. Don't take that as they're pissed off at you, right?
Yep.
Just take that and be like, put that to the side.
No, I'm 100% with you, and I think that's something that you definitely have to train yourself on. And I think if you're not accustomed to that way of living, then I think it definitely takes time to develop that. And I'm saying this just from my own experience, because that's something that I've come to realize that it's like, someone can react in any particular way, and it doesn't necessarily have to actually influence the way you think about yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like it can just be information. And I think, like, when you're in a neutral space, then you're able to objectively see, like, oh man, like those people are just not doing well. Like it has nothing to do with me. I literally just said one thing. But I feel like when your self-esteem is not very good, and when when you're still judging yourself and just in a bad place, then automatically you start thinking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? When in fact, like, it wasn't that you did anything wrong. But then it could also be the other way where, you could also see where you're at fault. Like maybe I did kind of come off in a particular way, you know? So it's kind of this
Yeah, maybe I
interesting.
influenced. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
Maybe I influenced this energy, right? Maybe I
Yeah, exactly. Like
influenced the energy, made it.
maybe I
Yeah.
was a part of it. Like maybe I did approach this person in a particular way that was inappropriate, or like, so it's like this interesting way of. That's why I'm saying it takes practice, because in essence, the only way you would become aware of whether of all these things is by being objectively looking at the situation instead of being on one side of the situation, right? Because the second that you've chosen a side, then it's hard to be objective, which I think that's where the whole idea of lowering your ego is important, because then you could see both sides. You could critically analyze your own behaviors, but also analyze the other side. So then you could kind of objectively see where things are at. And I think with time, you get better and better at that. And then you start to realize, oh, okay, well, most of the time it's actually just these people are just have a lot of chaotic energy. But then you could also be truthful enough to, like, man, like today I was a little bit grumpy, and like I did come off that way, and like I was being a bit aggressive or whatever, whatever. And that's what it seems like most people who are successful, and I mean, like, not just like successful where they just have money, but successful in terms of like happiness, but also like successful in whatever kind of craft they might do. Like building a championship team in whatever sport, whatever. Like it seems like that's the dichotomy of like being confident in what you're doing, but also having that humility to be like, no, you know what? Like we could have done better there. We could have done better there. I could admit that I'm at fault for this, for that. And that's actually one of the things that I picked up from Garyvee. He's the CEO of this company that he created. And he says, I assume 100% responsibility for everything. So in that sense, I feel like when you take 100% responsibility, then it takes it get you retain all your power. So instead of ever putting the blame or saying shit went wrong because of this person, no, well, it always comes back to me. And I think that's important, especially when you're the leader in something, leader of an organization or whatever, just taking 100% accountability. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, leadership is a whole nother animal. We're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna need another podcast to talk about leadership, but
Right.
I definitely would love to talk about that sometime. But man, the time has really
Yeah,
really
I
passed
know.
quickly this morning,
I
huh?
haven't been too thoughtful of the time, but let's see. It's already. I got you, man. Hey, man. I know you got a long schedule, busy schedule. I guess I'll just ask you my last question, and you can make it as brief as you'd like. If you had the entire human race in front of you, um, it was translated into all languages, everybody could understand you. What would be your message to the human race today?
Oh man, that's a good one. All right, let me think about this audience of 7 billion people real quick. What would they want to hear? Not even what would they want to hear, what would they need to hear?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for those of you who are watching, that percentage of the human race that I'm talking to, um, try and think about, you know, what was said today and think about your perspective on it. And then let go of that perspective and just try to think about nothing for a few minutes. Now, the best way to think about nothing, because it's really difficult to think about nothing, and that's mindfulness, right? The emptiness, is focus on your breath. So put the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth, right behind those two front teeth. So this is Dallas breathing here. Breathe in through the nose, deep into your dantian, into your stomach, into your diaphragm. So breathe low, let your stomach extend, and count your breath. So breathe in for 3 seconds, hold your breath for 3 seconds, and breathe out for 6 seconds. Do that for about 5 minutes. And then think about what was said today afterwards. That's really all I can say, and that's a long-winded answer, but focus on your breath, let go of anything that you're thinking, and then think about your perspective and see if it's changed a little bit.
Dude, I I've never gotten a response like that on any podcast that I've done, and I've asked that question to almost every guest. So I honestly, I really love that. It's very self-reflective, and I think it's very empowering. So Jordan, thank you so much for joining me and giving me an hour or so of your time. Jordan, I definitely look forward to the next one. I told you I live in SoCal right here too, so hopefully for the next one we can do it in person and we'll take the experience to the next level.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'd love to meet you in person. It was really great, kind of like starter kind of connection, building that relationship here.
Yeah, man. All right, I'm gonna cut the recording and then I'll officially say bye. All right.
All right, no worries.
Let's see.